am live. I am reading The Age of Perception. It's chapter 7 of this Many Lifetimes book, which was a collaboration between Joan Marshall Grants and Kelsey. Joan passed away in 1989. These are cases and their form of treatment. Here in this chapter we are talking about Joan's childhood memories, because she can recall very early childhood times. And she was describing, as she was only about a year old, she heard her mother telling her half-sister Iris about the fire alarm. And she found it very interesting, and I continue here with the last passage and continue from there. Even while I was listening to their conversation, I made up my mind to summon fire engines at the earliest opportunity. I would have to be alone in my parents' bedroom, be able to climb on the bed without assistance, discover how to break the glass cover and then pull the brass knob. I understood perfectly well that this would be considered exceedingly naughty. At best I should be scolded, and at worst have my knickers removed and be put on a high marble-topped chest of drawers, a form of punishment known as putting a hot baby on cold marble, which I found intensely humiliating. It also scared me, because I was fearful of pitching off it onto my head. I knew I had died from falling from a height on some earlier occasion. After a week of diligent practice, I could climb onto even the highest bed. On the following day, I managed to escape from the nursery when the gate at the head of the stairs was unlatched, and get undetected into my parents' bedroom. I could not reach the glass cover of the fire alarm until I had gained added height by standing on books, which I piled on the bedside table, and I was unable to break it until I realized that a soda water bottle, which happened to be handy, would make an excellent club. The knob was the next problem, but after tugging at it with mounting frustration, I slipped off my vantage point, still clinging to the knob, and my weight dragged it out of its socket. By the time the fire engines came clanging up the hill, I was standing on a chair with my nose pressed against the window pane. Firemen came running up the front steps. More firemen started unrolling a hose and unhooking ladders. Then I heard Father's voice assuring them that none of this was necessary, as there was no fire, and more voices raised and expostulating. This was my moment of triumph, and I hurried downstairs, expecting to be praised first, if punished later. I pointed at the largest fireman and then to myself, shouting, "Me!" almost the full range of my vocabulary. The louder I shouted, the louder I was hushed, until, boiling with indignation at being ignored, I was carried off to the nursery. Unless children's innate sense of justice has been blurred by brainwashing, which has induced groundless guilt feelings, they can appear more ruthless than the average adult. When I was about 4, the nanny I loved went for her summer holiday and was replaced by a temporary, whom I detested. My cousin, Westray, who was 6 and very strong for his age, he grew to be 6'8", shared my opinion of her. Not only did she dislike us both, but she was horribly cruel to mice. She set mouse-traps in every cupboard, not spring traps, which would at least have killed them quickly, but wire cages into which they were lured with cheese, only to be slowly drowned in the basin while the fiend gloated over their dying struggles. We did our best to avenge the mice by making the fiend's life, as difficult as we could, but she was too large, too strong, too sly for us to do so effectively. She also constantly sneaked on us to our parents, which led to further recriminations, and they refused to recognize her fiendishness because she had something incomprehensible called splendid references. She had made me stand in the corner when this failed to do more than make me chant, "I love being in the corner because I can't see Nanny's horrid face." She pulled my hair so viciously that a strand of it came out in her hand. I had not noticed that Westray, always a loyal ally, was sitting on the floor taking off one of his new and heavy football boots. The fiend was glaring at me, red in the face and panting. I knew she was about to shake me till my teeth chattered. Westray stood up, the boot in his hand, and took careful aim. The boot hit her on the temple and she crumpled and then fell flat on her back. I have killed her, said Westray with calm satisfaction. And a very good thing too, I replied warmly. There will be a tremendous row, said Westray. We shall be sent to bed without supper for at least a week. But well worth it. Think of the mice she drowned. She did not really deserve such a nice death. Then I added hastily, in case Westray should think I did not appreciate his splendid effort, but we couldn't have drowned her. She's too big. Not one twinge of remorse did either of us feel. A dead mouse more than cancelled out a dead fiend, and the fiend had killed enough mice to deserve a dozen executions. At that moment, Mother came into the room and exclaimed, "Is she drunk or has she fainted?" I was about to say she's dead, wondering whether it was necessary to add that we had killed her, when to my dismay the fiend opened her eyes. She failed to notice Mother, and glared with such ferocity at Westray that Mother said briskly, "Lie down at once, you are having a fit. How monstrous to take a post with children when you knew that you are an epileptic." I felt almost sorry for the fiend at that moment, for the more she tried to explain that she had been attacked by Westray, the more firmly Mother became convinced that she was not only an epileptic, but suffering from delusions, which proved she was raving mad. Westray and I were sent out of the room, and never saw the fiend again, for she had made the fatal mistake of being rude to Mother, and so was sacked without notice. Everyone was especially nice to us that day, to console us for the terrible shock to our nerves, which we considered blissfully funny. After Westray had left, I told Father what had really happened. He cautioned me, as I knew he would, not to mention the matter to Mother, and then laughed until laughter tears made him have to polish his spectacles. I received no religious education, and no one I had ever met went to church, but I presumed that even the most dim-witted adults knew that between bodies they went to the place I privately called the beautiful country. I had even temporarily held the theory that I could return there if I walked very slowly into the sea at low tide and went on walking until my hat floated off. I tried this on 2 occasions at dawn before Nanny was awake, but funked going any further when the sea was up to my chin. So when I suddenly realized that the man who was sitting opposite me at luncheon was going to die that night, it seemed natural to congratulate him on the fact that tomorrow would be his happiest birthday. He was a doctor of whom I was fond, so I was sad that I might not see him for some time, but knew that such feelings were exceedingly selfish. "It is not my birthday tomorrow," he said kindly, so I hastened to explain that I meant the kind of birthday that happened on the day one died. I was dismissed from the dining room, soon to be followed by Mother, who scolded me severely for making such a cruel remark. Protest that I was not in the least cruel to congratulate someone I loved because something especially nice was about to happen to him were brushed angrily aside. I was at last reduced to tears, which, though taken for tears of contrition, were really of fury at the total incomprehensibility of grown-ups, and was made to promise never again to try to draw attention to myself by telling such wicked lies. At last Mother calmed down sufficiently to say that I was unlikely to have done any harm, for the doctor was only 55 and knew he was perfectly healthy. But the row flared up again the following morning when the doctor's body was found peacefully dead in his bed. These 2 episodes, I think, well illustrate the attitude of normal children towards death. Their innate knowledge tells them that death is a trivial incident, which they have often experienced, so they have no fear of it, unless fear has been induced through stories of a vengeful God, eager to punish any behavior considered wicked by the grown-ups, or descriptions of hell, or through hearing the dead talk about as though they were in dire need of sympathy. A slap-up funeral, especially viewing a corpse which has been turned by embalmers into a dreadful puppet, can cause even a robust child to have nightmares, which is yet another reason for condemning the current mortuary rites. Death to healthy children means to go somewhere else. So what is more natural than that they should wish that an irksome member of the household, who has refused to take hints that his absence would be a welcome relief, should depart by dying? The view held by most psychoanalysts that baby boys at the drop of a diaper would slay pa so as to have a pop at mum is, I'm convinced, nonsensical. But as many children have parents who cordially dislike each other, which the children know only too well, even if parental rows never take place in their presence, they wish that one of the contestants would leave the arena so that there could be a bit of peace. Freud grew up in an environment where there was not only one father figure making a nuisance of himself, but 2 generations of patriarchs living in the same house, so he would have had to be totally unrealistic not to have cordially wished them out of the way. But to him, the patriarchs were invulnerable, even in fantasy, because behind them was Jehovah, an implacable God who demanded even such improbable sacrifices from male infants as their foreskins. So a perfectly healthy longing to be fledged was banished to Freud's unconscious, until it emerged to be labeled the Oedipus complex. A child who allows his perceptions to fall into disuse may gain short-term advantages. If he is clever enough to cozen his blood skin, he may become the focus of their anxieties, and if he has sufficient innate hatred, he may feel strong through being a rebel. But he will buy his transient stability at a price which may impoverish his personality. For not having retained the moral courage to see either himself or other people as they really are, which might be better or worse than he prefers to imagine, he is only able to identify his fellow human beings by their status symbols, which seldom echo the quality of their hearts. Unless he regains his perception, his acquaintances may be numerous and his loins prolific, but he will always be lonely, for the man who is a stranger to himself lives amongst strangers. His condition would be sad enough even if there were no natural gaps in temporal continuity. But we all wake in order to learn what we should do when we sleep. We are all born in order to acquire the compassion for which we shall be welcomed by our forerunners. To earn this welcome, we have very often died, only to find that death dissipates our most cravenly cherished delusions. Because we fear to be naked and unashamed, we scuttle back in search of another garment of flesh. But eventually, we shall love enough and be sufficiently lovable to accept who we were and are and will be, for fig leaves are worn only by exiles from Eden. So that was the end of chapter 7. Chapter 8 is again by Kelsey, and it's entitled Parenthood. Would you really like a baby? Would a baby really like you? And I'll read this another time. I'm wishing everybody a lovely Thursday, the 19th of September 2024.